here we introduce powers of I, and the question motivating this investigation is I to the power of 11 equals what? Okay, well, let's just start at the beginning, right? And just look at some examples here. Let's do, well, I equals I. That's not very interesting. I squared is -1. We know that by definition of I. Well, I cubed, let's see off to the side here. I cubed is I times I squared, which is I times -1, because we already decided that I squared was -1 before, which is -I. So I cubed is -I. All right, I to the 4th. Okay, let's go off to the side again here. I to the 4th, well, that's just I times I cubed. But we already decided that I cubed is -I. Okay, so that's I times -I. Well, that's -I squared. Well, we know that I squared is -1, -1, and negative times -1 is +1. So now we're back to 1 again. Okay, and so on. I to the 5th. Okay, well, off to the side again, here we go. I to the 5th is simply I times I to the 4th, but we know that I to the 4th is 1 already. So this is I times 1, which is I. I to the 5th is I. We might be starting to sense a pattern here. Let's keep going. We can even put in here 1 equals 1 to keep it consistent. I to the 6th. Okay, we'll go up here for I to the 6th. I to the 6th, well, that's just I times I to the 5th. But we already decided that I to the 5th was I. So I times I is I squared. And we know that I squared is -1. -1. Maybe you can guess what I to the 7th is going to be. Look at this pattern. 1, I, -1, -I. 1, I, -1, you guessed it, -I. I to the 8th, what do you think? 1. I to the 9th, I. Okay, and we could go all the way up. Let's just do it. Whoops, I to the 10th. And then I'll show you a quicker way to do it. I to the 10th, -1. I to the 11th, -I. We're just following the pattern. Okay, so there's the answer, and that is a hard way to go. Let me show you an easier way to do it. Right, we see the cycle here. Every fourth power, it comes back again to 1. So if we just take 4 and divide it into this power, which is 11, and look at the remainder, that will tell us which power of I it's equivalent to. Okay, so let's see what happens. If we go 4 divided into 11, we get 2. We don't care about that. We care about the remainder. 2 times 4 is 8. Subtract off, we get 3. Here's our remainder. So what this tells us is that I to the 11th is the same thing as I cubed. And from here we know that I cubed is -I. Okay, so a quicker way to do it, this works with any power of I to the n. So let's just look at the possibilities here. We could get remainder 0. Okay, we could get remainder of 1. We could get remainder of 2. Or we could get remainder of 3. Those are the only possibilities for the remainders. So if you just know this little portion here, that's enough to get you through all these powers of I exercises. So in general, when you have I to the power of n, you take that nth power, you divide that by 4, and then you get some remainder. Is either 0, 1, 2, or 3, right? And then you go up here, and that tells you what your answer will be. And that will work for any power of n.